From flintlock muskets to lever-action repeaters, the story of American hunting is written in gunpowder and innovation. Every new spark in firearm technology didn't just change the way hunters aimed, it reshaped how Americans lived, survived, and connected to the wild frontier. From the early trappers who stalked the Rockies with muzzleloaders to settlers relying on the Winchester for food and protection, each weapon marked a turning point in history. This is the untold evolution of how the gun transformed hunting from a necessity into a national tradition. If you love diving deep into the legends, tools, and true stories of the Old West, make sure to leave a comment below and subscribe to the channel for more incredible tales from America's frontier past. Humans first pursued game with simple tools long before firearms existed. Over time, those tools evolved from stone implements to bronze and then iron. In North America, indigenous peoples relied on finely made stone knives, spear points, and arrowheads for countless generations. Firearms arriving from Europe gradually became more common and affordable in the 1600s, beginning a major shift in hunting practices. Before that shift, hunters developed projectile tools that also appeared in times of conflict, most notably the bow, the atlatl, and the sling. For thousands of years, these remained the primary technologies for taking game at a distance. Across much of the continent, people hunted on foot until horses spread after their introduction by the Spanish in the early 1500s. Without mounts or longer-range tools, practical range was limited, and hunters often needed to approach animals closely, which carried real safety risks, especially around large herd or predator species. Because of these constraints, coordinated efforts by groups were common, with teamwork increasing the chances of a successful and efficient harvest. Matchlock firearms. By the late 1500s, European artists like Jacques de Gaulle II were already illustrating soldiers, known as musketeers, early users of handheld firearms. Around this time, gun technology was still in its infancy, but it was beginning to reshape both warfare and hunting across the Old World. When the first European settlers reached the shores of North America in the early 1500s, they brought with them the latest firearms of their day: matchlock muskets. These guns, first seen in the late 1400s, were among the earliest practical attempts to create a reliable ignition system for gunpowder. A matchlock musket was a single-shot, muzzle-loading weapon, and while it could fire a lead ball with more power than a bow, it was cumbersome, heavy, and slow to operate. The design itself was often more artistic than functional. The wooden stocks were ornately shaped but not necessarily comfortable, and the barrels were long and weighty. To shoot accurately, users often rested the gun on a Y-shaped support stick or even on a companion's shoulder. A reminder of how difficult these early firearms were to manage in the field. The firing mechanism relied on a slow-burning match cord, resembling a small rope with one glowing ember at its end. This cord was clamped in a metal arm called a serpentine. When the trigger was pulled, the serpentine moved the burning tip into a small pan filled with gunpowder. The powder in the pan would ignite, sending a flame through a small hole into the barrel to set off the main charge. It was an ingenious system for its time, but also delicate and unreliable. Hunters and soldiers alike faced many challenges using matchlocks. The constant glow of the match made it difficult to remain unnoticed, and the light smoke it emitted could reveal one's location. Moisture was another problem. Even a light drizzle could render the gun useless. Because of this, matchlocks were rarely practical in poor weather, especially in the damp forests of early colonial America. Despite these limitations, matchlocks represented the cutting edge of 16th century firearm design. They required less training than archery and could deliver significant force with each shot, though their slow reloading speed and complex ignition meant that patience and preparation were essential. A hunter's kit from the era typically included spare match cord, powder, lead balls or shot, and a tool for cleaning the barrel. Since the glowing cord could easily burn out, it was vital to carry materials to relight it, usually by striking flint and steel to create a spark. Portable fire-starting devices wouldn't appear until the 1820s, with early lighters emerging in 1823, followed by the first friction matches around 1826. While the matchlock musket was far from perfect, it laid the foundation for centuries of firearm innovation. Every step forward, from matchlock to flintlock to percussion cap, brought hunters closer to the reliable, weather-resistant firearms that would later define the American frontier. Wheel-lock firearms. The next major step in early firearm development was the wheel-lock mechanism, a true leap in ingenuity after the matchlock. Invented in the early 1500s, likely in Germany, it represented one of the first attempts to create a self-igniting firearm. Historical records suggest it appeared around 1517 to 1520, though it took several decades for this complex technology to reach the Americas. By the time the first wheel locks crossed the Atlantic, they rendered the older matchlock design largely outdated. Instead of relying on a glowing match cord, the wheel lock used a self-contained mechanical system to create sparks. This eliminated the need for an external flame and made it safer and more reliable, especially in damp or windy weather. At the heart of the system was a hardened steel wheel, wound under tension with a small wrench called a spanner. To ready the gun, the shooter would wind the wheel tightly, then secure a small piece of pyrite, a naturally spark-producing mineral, in a clamp on a curved metal arm called the cock. When the trigger was pulled, the spring mechanism released the wheel, causing it to spin rapidly. As the spinning steel scraped against the pyrite, it produced a shower of sparks that ignited the priming powder in the pan, which in turn fired the main charge. Compared with the matchlock, the wheel lock was a technological marvel. It removed the constant glow and smoke of a match cord, made hunting more discreet, and allowed the gun to function even in light rain or high humidity. Hunters appreciated that they no longer needed to carry a burning rope, but they still had to bring fine powder for the pan, coarse powder for the barrel, lead balls or shot, and a ramrod for loading, and of course the essential spanner wrench. Without it, the gun could not be wound or fired. Despite these advantages, the wheel lock was far from simple. Each one was a handcrafted precision instrument, assembled by skilled gunsmiths who meticulously filed and fitted dozens of small interlocking parts. Because every component was made by hand, no two locks were exactly alike. This meant repairs were difficult, requiring an artisan with both the right tools and the right experience. The craftsmanship of the wheel lock era produced some of the most ornate firearms ever made. Many surviving examples, such as 17th century Austrian and German sporting rifles, feature exquisite carvings, engraved metalwork, and decorative inlays of ivory or bone. These guns were often as much symbols of status and artistry as they were functional hunting tools. However, the wheel lock's beauty was also its weakness. Its intricate mechanism made it expensive to produce, delicate to maintain, and impractical for mass use in the rugged conditions of the New World. If a hunter lost or damaged the small spanner wrench in the field, the firearm could not be rewound, leaving it temporarily useless until the tool was replaced. Even so, the wheel lock represents a remarkable chapter in the evolution of firearms. It bridged the gap between the unreliable matchlock and the far more efficient flintlock, laying crucial groundwork for the firearms that would later transform both hunting and exploration across the continents. Flintlock firearms. By the mid-1500s, firearm design entered a new era with the invention of the flintlock, a system that would dominate for nearly 3 centuries. The term flintlock has become a general label for several related ignition systems, including the Michelin and Snap-ons, all of which used flint to create sparks. While their internal mechanics differed slightly, they shared the same core principle, using a piece of flint to strike steel and ignite gunpowder. The flintlock simplified what earlier designs had made overly complex. Where the wheel lock required winding springs and special tools, the new mechanism offered reliability through elegant simplicity. Its design preserved the key idea of generating sparks mechanically, but discarded the intricate gearing of the wheel system in favor of a more durable and serviceable approach. A small, sharpened flint was clamped in the jaws of a spring-loaded arm, known then as a cock, the ancestor of the modern hammer. When pulled back, the cock locked under tension. Upon pulling the trigger, the arm snapped forward, causing the flint to strike a steel plate called a frizzen. This brief but powerful contact sent hot sparks into a small depression known as the priming pan, igniting the fine gunpowder there. That spark then passed through a tiny touch hole to set off the main powder charge inside the barrel. The flintlock system removed the need for an external burning match and made firing in damp or windy weather far more practical. The frizzen itself served a dual purpose. It both generated sparks and covered the powder pan, keeping moisture out while the user carried the firearm. Even so, the system was not flawless. Sometimes a strike would fail to spark properly, requiring the shooter to reset and try again. Other times, the pan would flash brightly, but fail to ignite the main charge. An event so common it gave rise to the enduring phrase, "flash in the pan." During the flintlock period, firearms became more refined, balanced, and manageable. Craftsmen learned to shape stocks that fit the shoulder more comfortably, and barrels, though still long and smoothbored, were lighter than before. These improvements made flintlocks more accurate and better suited for hunting and military use alike. By the late 1600s and early 1700s, flintlock muskets had evolved from ornate curiosities into practical field weapons. Their smoothbore barrels allowed for versatility. They could fire a single lead ball for larger game or smaller shot pellets for birds and small animals. Unlike the highly decorative firearms of earlier centuries, these were working guns, tools meant for both survival and defense in the wilderness. In North America, the flintlock became central to colonial life. Hunters and frontiersmen depended on it for food gathering, exploration, and protection. Among the most famous were the long, slender Kentucky and Pennsylvania rifles, masterpieces of craftsmanship that combined European design with frontier practicality. A typical hunter's kit of the time included a powder horn, fine priming powder, coarser main powder, cloth patches or wadding, round lead balls, a ramrod, and spare flints. Each shot required careful loading and preparation, but the system's reliability made it invaluable for more than 2 centuries. The flintlock remained at the forefront of firearm technology well into the early 1800s. Even as rifled barrels, with spiral grooves to spin the projectile, began to appear, flintlocks continued to dominate. Rifling improved accuracy dramatically, but tighter barrel tolerances also made reloading more difficult, especially once black powder fouling accumulated after several shots. Without regular cleaning, a flintlock rifle could become stubbornly hard to reload. Despite its drawbacks, susceptibility to moisture, fragile flints, and slow reloading, the flintlock represented the perfect blend of art and engineering for its time. It marked the peak of the muzzleloading era and paved the way for the percussion cap system of the 19th century, a breakthrough introduced by an inventive Scottish clergyman that would change firearm history forever. Percussion hunting firearms. According to historical accounts, the Reverend Alexander John Forsyth, a Scottish clergyman and avid sportsman, first conceived the idea of percussion ignition during a hunting trip in the early 1800s. While out duck hunting with his flintlock fowling piece, Forsyth grew frustrated by the gun's long lock time. The delay between pulling the trigger and the moment the firearm actually discharged. This delay came from the flintlock's two-step ignition process. First, the sparks ignited the fine powder in the pan, and only then did the main charge fire through the touch hole. That brief hesitation was enough for the startled birds to move, turning many shots into missed opportunities. Forsyth reasoned that there must be a faster, more reliable way to ignite a firearm, and history proved him right. Driven by curiosity and scientific knowledge, Forsyth began experimenting with a new chemical compound known as fulminate of mercury, a highly sensitive explosive powder that detonated instantly when struck. By 1807, he had patented what became known as the scent bottle lock, named for its small, bottle-shaped primer container attached to the gun's lock mechanism. Each time the gun was cocked, a small amount of fulminate was dispensed onto a priming surface. When the hammer fell, the impact ignited the compound, which in turn set off the main gunpowder charge inside the barrel. This process eliminated the need for an exposed priming pan and provided ignition that was nearly instantaneous. a groundbreaking improvement in speed and dependability for the time. Forsyth's invention marked a turning point in firearm evolution. By removing the external powder pan, the design became far less vulnerable to weather and moisture, problems that had plagued matchlocks and flintlocks for centuries. It also simplified operation, making firearms safer to carry and easier to maintain in the field. However, the scent bottle system itself had limitations. It required precise handling of the delicate fulminate powder and was somewhat complex to reload. Inventors across Europe soon began improving upon Forsyth's work, searching for a more practical and standardized method of percussion ignition. The next great breakthrough came with the development of the copper percussion cap, a tiny self-contained cap that held a measured amount of priming compound within a small cup of metal. When struck by the hammer, it detonated cleanly and consistently. This simple innovation transformed firearm design. The percussion cap was patented in the United States in 1822, partly to bypass European patent restrictions tied to Forsyth's earlier work. With the percussion cap, the ignition system became truly modular and efficient. It replaced loose priming powder entirely, made reloading faster, and dramatically increased reliability under all weather conditions. Hunters needed only a powder horn, lead projectiles, and a pouch of percussion caps, far less cumbersome than the elaborate flintlock gear of the previous century. The cap's water-resistant properties were a major advantage, allowing consistent firing even in damp or rainy conditions. Although the percussion cap era was relatively brief compared to the long reign of the flintlock, its impact was enormous. From the 1820s through the mid-19th century, percussion firearms became the standard for both hunting and military use. Their simplicity and dependability made them ideal for frontiersmen, explorers, and settlers expanding westward across North America. By the 1860s, the invention of self-contained metallic cartridges began to supersede percussion systems, combining the cap, powder, and projectile into a single efficient unit. Even so, many hunters continued to rely on their percussion rifles well into the later 19th century, trusting their proven accuracy and familiar operation. The work of Reverend Forsyth stands as one of the most influential innovations in firearm history. His pursuit of a faster, cleaner, and more dependable ignition method bridged the gap between the flintlock age and the modern cartridge, forever transforming the art and science of hunting. Advent of self-contained metallic cartridges. By the late 19th century, firearm technology reached a milestone that would permanently shape hunting as we know it today. After centuries of evolution, from matchlocks to flintlocks to percussion systems, the development of the self-contained metallic cartridge in the 18th century revolutionized the way hunters and marksmen used firearms. A metallic cartridge was a simple yet transformative idea. It combined all the essential components needed for firing, the primer, powder charge, and projectile, into a single, durable unit. The early versions used copper cases, later replaced by stronger and more heat-resistant brass, which remains the standard today. At the rear of the casing sat a small percussion primer designed to ignite the powder instantly upon impact from the firing pin. This chemical reaction propelled the bullet forward through the barrel with consistent power and precision. The brilliance of this innovation lay in its efficiency and reliability. For the first time, hunters no longer needed to carry multiple types of loose powder, wadding, and projectiles. Ammunition could now be transported safely, stored for long periods, and loaded rapidly, even under less than ideal weather conditions. Metallic cartridges also resisted moisture far better than the exposed powder systems of earlier centuries, ensuring dependable ignition in nearly any climate. The arrival of the metallic cartridge also paved the way for a new generation of repeating firearms, guns capable of firing multiple rounds before reloading. Few names are more synonymous with this transformation than Winchester. Working alongside legendary designer John Moses Browning, Winchester introduced a series of rifles that would define the American frontier. The models 1873, 1876, 1886, 1892, 1894, and 1895. Each represented a leap forward in design, strength, and performance. These rifles brought a new level of practicality and confidence to hunters. For the first time, a person could carry a single firearm and a belt of cartridges into the wilderness, ready for nearly any situation. While metallic cartridges weren't completely waterproof, their weather resistance was far superior to any previous ignition system. They also offered smoother reloading, more consistent accuracy, and reduced risk of misfires, a combination that made hunting both safer and more efficient. By the early 20th century, metallic cartridges had become the universal standard. They enabled the rise of bolt-action and semi-automatic rifles, marking another leap forward in firearm engineering. Manufacturers such as Savage, Remington, Winchester, Mossberg, and Weatherby expanded the market with designs that catered to hunters of every region and pursuit. Each company introduced rifles known for their durability, precision, and adaptability to a wide range of calibers. Meanwhile, ammunition technology continued to evolve. The introduction of center fire cartridges, where the primer was placed at the center of the casing base, allowed for stronger cases, higher pressures, and greater reusability compared to earlier rimfire designs. This made center fire cartridges the dominant choice for large game hunting and remains true to this day. Modern hunters now enjoy an astonishing variety of ammunition options. From mass-produced factory loads to specialized Wildcat cartridges and precision handloads, today's shooters can tailor performance for nearly any purpose. From small game in the woods to long-range hunting in open country, the efficiency, accuracy, and adaptability of the metallic cartridge have transformed hunting from a traditional craft into a refined science of ballistics. In every sense, the invention of the self-contained cartridge represents the true foundation of modern firearm history. It unified centuries of experimentation into one elegant, enduring solution, a design so effective that, even after 150 years, it remains at the core of nearly every firearm carried into the field today. From the slow-burning matchlocks of the 1500s to the sleek, precision-engineered rifles of today, the story of firearm evolution is really the story of human ingenuity. Every new spark of innovation, from Reverend Forsyth's percussion lock to Winchester's repeating rifle, reshaped how Americans hunted, lived, and connected with the land. What began as a matter of survival became a craft, a culture, and eventually a tradition that endures to this day. Modern hunters may carry polymer stocks and laser optics, but the spirit of the frontier, the patience, the skill, and the respect for nature remains unchanged. If you enjoyed exploring the incredible journey of firearm technology and how it forever changed American hunting, leave a comment below and tell us which era of gun history fascinates you most. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the legends, inventions, and untold stories that shaped the American Old West.